The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Coyote Ridge, a town that seemed to exist purely out of stubborn defiance against the desert's will to reclaim it. The year was 1875, and civilization here meant little more than a handful of weathered buildings, a sheriff who spent more time drunk than sober, and enough saloons to ensure every man could find his poison of choice. Ethan Cole spurred his horse down Main Street, kicking up clouds of dust that made the few pedestrians curse and shield their faces. At 28, he cut an impressive figure, tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of gunmetal. His reputation preceded him wherever he rode fastest draw in 3 counties, luckiest gambler this side of the Colorado River, and possessed of a reckless streak wider than the Rio Grande. The Lucky Dollar Saloon beckoned like an old friend, its bat-winged doors promising the familiar comfort of whiskey, cards, and trouble. Ethan tied his horse to the hitching post and strode inside, spurs jangling with each step. Well, if it ain't Ethan Cole himself," Buck Harrison called out from a corner table. The burly rancher grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Thought you'd sworn off our humble establishment after cleaning us out last month." "A man can change his mind. Buck." Ethan sauntered over, tipping his hat to the other players. Jake Morrison, a wiry cattle rustler with shifty eyes, and Samuel Big Sam Thompson, whose massive frame made the chair beneath him creak dangerously. "Besides, heard you boys got your hands on some fresh money. Seemed only neighborly to help you spend it." The men laughed, that rough sound unique to those who lived hard and expected to die young. Ethan pulled up a chair, and soon the cards were flying, accompanied by the clink of coins and glasses. Hours passed in a blur of bets and bluffs. The whiskey flowed freely, loosening tongues and wallets alike. Ethan was up considerably, his pile of winnings drawing envious glares from across the table. "You got the devil's own luck," Jake muttered, dealing another hand. "Ain't natural, the way cards fall for you." "Just skill and intuition. Boys." Ethan grinned, examining his hand. Another winner, by the looks of it. Though, I'll admit, Lady Luck does seem to fancy me. Speaking of ladies, Big Sam interjected, his voice slurred from drink. "Heard tell you ain't never gonna settle down. Cole, that true?" Ethan shrugged. "Why would I chain myself to one woman when the world's full of them marriages for fools and farmers?" Buck leaned forward, a sly glint in his eye. "That so would you bet on it?" "I'd bet on anything," Ethan replied confidently. "Name your wager." The 3 men exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Buck's grin widened. "All right then, this hand decides it. You win. You take everything on the table. Must be near $500 by now. You lose. Yeah. You marry the quietest woman in Coyote Ridge by week's end." The saloon seemed to hold its breath. Even the piano player paused mid-melody. Ethan's eyes narrowed, calculating. $500 was more than most men saw in a year. The quietest woman, and who might that be? "Clara Dawson," Jake supplied. "Old Doc Dawson's daughter. Girl barely speaks 2 words together. Plain as prairie grass and about as interesting." Ethan had seen her around town, a slim figure in simple calico dresses, always keeping her eyes downcast, moving through the streets like a shadow. She worked at her father's store, measuring out flour and coffee with precise, silent efficiency. Not ugly, exactly, but forgettable, the kind of woman who seemed to fade into the background of life. "One hand decides it?" Ethan asked, the whiskey making him bold. "All or nothing." "All or nothing," Buck confirmed. "Unless you're scared of a little commitment." The challenge hung in the air like gunsmoke. Ethan's pride flared. He'd never backed down from a bet in his life. And he wasn't about to start now. Besides, what were the odds he'd been winning all night? "Deal the cards," he said. Jake's hands moved with practiced ease. Distributing the cards face down, Ethan lifted his slowly, confidence radiating from every gesture. 2 pairs, queens and eights, a solid hand. "I'll stand pat," he announced. One by one, the others revealed their hands. Jake had nothing. Big Sam showed a single pair of jacks. Then Buck laid down his cards with a theatrical flourish. "Full house," he declared. "Aces over kings." The color drained from Ethan's face. He stared at the cards as if they might change if he looked hard enough. Around them, the saloon erupted in hoots and hollers. Looks like Ethan Cole's finally getting himself hitched. To Clara Dawson, no less, the mouse is getting herself a wildcat. This calls for drinks all around. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You set me up." Now, Buck said mildly, though his grin was triumphant. "A bet's a bet, unless the great Ethan Cole is going back on his word." The implication cut deeper than any bullet. In the West, a man's word was his bond. To Welsh on a bet would mean social death, the complete destruction of his reputation. He'd be run out of every saloon from here to California. "Fine," Ethan ground out, "but don't expect me to play the devoted husband." "Oh, we just said you had to marry her," Jake laughed. "What you do after that is your business." The next morning came too soon, bringing with it a pounding headache and the horrible realization that last night hadn't been a whiskey-fueled dream. Ethan stumbled out of his boarding house room to find Buck, Jake, and Big Sam waiting in the lobby, grinning like cats with cream. "Morning, bridegroom." Buck greeted cheerfully. "Best get yourself cleaned up. Already spoke to Reverend Mills. He's expecting us at noon." "You spoke to him. How does the whole damn town already know about this?" "News travels fast in Coyote Ridge," Big Sam said, especially news this entertaining. They dragged him to the barber for a shave and a bath. Though Ethan submitted with ill grace, the humiliation burned worse than the harsh lye soap. Him, trapped into marriage because of a stupid bet. It was like something out of a dime novel, except he was living it. Meanwhile, across town, Clara Dawson was experiencing her own nightmare. She'd been measuring out sugar for Mrs. Henderson when her father had called her into the back room, his face grave. "Clara, honey, I need to tell you something." She'd listened in growing horror as he explained the situation. A bet, marriage, to Ethan Cole, of all people, the wild young gunslinger who treated life like one big game. "I told them absolutely not," Doc Dawson said, his weathered face flushed with anger. "But they're claiming it's a matter of honor now, that backing out would bring shame on our family name." Clara's hands trembled. At 22, she'd long accepted her fate as a spinster. She wasn't pretty like the other girls, didn't know how to flutter her eyelashes or make charming conversation. She was just Clara, quiet, dependable, invisible Clara. And now she was to be married to a man who'd probably forget her name by morning. "I won't force you," her father said gently. "Say the word and I'll run them all out of town. Consequences be damned." Clara looked at her father, old before his time, struggling to keep the store afloat, fighting to maintain respectability in a town that respected little beyond strength and gold. If she refused, would the shame follow them? Would business suffer? Would they be forced to leave? Start over somewhere new with nothing? "I'll do it," she whispered. "Clara." "I said I'll do it, Papa." Her voice grew stronger. "It's just marriage. Women have endured worse." The ceremony, if it could be called that, was a mockery of everything a wedding should be. Half the town crowded into the small church, drawn by the spectacle. Ethan stood at the altar looking like he was facing a firing squad, still reeking faintly of whiskey despite his bath. Clara wore her best dress, a dove-gray cotton that made her look even more washed out than usual. Reverend Mills performed the service with obvious reluctance, rushing through the vows as if speed might make the whole affair less objectionable. When he reached the part about objections, The church fairly vibrated with suppressed laughter. "Do you, Ethan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "I do." "Do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's response was so quiet the Reverend had to ask her to repeat it. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. You may, that is, the groom may kiss the bride." Ethan turned to Clara with all the enthusiasm of a man approaching the gallows. She stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on his chest, a faint pink staining her cheeks. He leaned down and brushed his lips against hers in the briefest possible contact, so quick it barely qualified as a kiss. The church erupted in catcalls and applause. Someone, probably Buck, had brought bottles of champagne, and corks popped like gunfire. Clara flinched at the sound. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole," someone called out, and the name sounded foreign. Wrong. The reception was held at the Lucky Dollar. Because of course it was, Ethan immediately abandoned his new bride to join his friends at the bar, leaving Clara standing alone near the door, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Don't take it personal," a woman's voice said beside her. Clara turned to find Rosalie, one of the saloon girls, offering a sympathetic smile. "Men are fools, especially that one. You want some advice?" Clara nodded mutely. "Don't let him see you cry. Whatever you do, don't give them the satisfaction. You're stronger than you look. I can tell. Use it." Before Clara could respond, Rosalie sashayed away, leaving Clara to ponder her words. Strong her, the woman must be mistaken. The afternoon wore on in a blur of drinking and crude jokes at the newlyweds' expense. Ethan, deep in his cups again, held court at the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with tales of his lost freedom. "Like a wild mustang brought to heel," he declared dramatically. "Cut down in my prime by the institution of matrimony. Oh, quit your belly aching." Buck laughed. "Clara's a fine woman, quiet, hard-working, won't give you no trouble." "That's what you think," Ethan muttered. "Quiet ones are always hiding something," as if summoned by his words. Clara appeared at his elbow. "It's getting late," she said softly. "Perhaps we should, that is, shouldn't we go?" Go. To his room at the boarding house. He supposed, or maybe she expected him to find them proper lodgings. The thought made his head spin. "You go on," he said, waving her away. "I'll be along." Her face remained expressionless, but something flickered in her eyes. Hurt anger. It was gone before he could identify it. "Very well," she said, and turned to leave. "Hey," he called after her, guilt pricking at him despite himself. "Take this." He pulled out a few coins. "Get yourself a room at the hotel for tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." She looked at the money, then at him, and for a moment he thought she might throw it back in his face. Instead, she took it with steady hands. "Thank you," she said, and walked out with her head high. Ethan watched her go, an uncomfortable feeling settling in his chest. He'd won hundreds of hands of poker, faced down armed men without blinking. But something about Clara Dawson, Clara Cole now, he reminded himself with a wince, unsettled him. "Another whiskey," he called to the bartender. Tomorrow he'd figure out what to do about this mess. Tonight, he planned to drink until he forgot he was a married man. Outside, Clara walked through the darkening streets, the coins heavy in her hand. Behind her, laughter spilled from the saloon, a mockery of wedding bells. She didn't cry. Rosalie had been right about that much. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But as she climbed the steps to the hotel, Clara Dawson Cole made herself a promise. They all thought they knew her. Quiet, plain, forgettable Clara. They thought this marriage was a joke, that she was a joke. They were wrong. And someday, somehow, she'd prove it. The morning after the wedding dawned gray and unforgiving, matching Ethan's mood perfectly. He woke in his boarding house room with a head that felt split in two and a mouth that tasted like he'd been chewing on old boot leather. For a blessed moment, he forgot about the previous day's events. Then memory crashed over him like a flash flood. Married. He was married to Clara Dawson. A knock at the door made him groan. "Go away," he called, pulling the pillow over his head. The knock came again, more insistent, with a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. Ethan hauled himself out of bed and yanked open the door. Clara stood in the hallway, dressed in the same gray dress from yesterday, carrying a small carpet bag. She looked fresh and composed, which only made Ethan more aware of his own disheveled state. "Good morning," she said quietly. "What are you doing here?" The words came out harsher than intended. A faint line appeared between her brows. "We're married. I thought, that is, we need to discuss living arrangements." "Living arrangements? Of course." Ethan ran a hand through his tangled hair. "Look, about that. The boarding house manager says you'll need to move out." Clara interrupted, her voice still soft but firm. "He doesn't allow married couples. Says it's not respectable." "Not respectable? I've been living here for 2 years. "Things are different now." She shifted her weight, the first sign of discomfort he'd seen from her. "My father knows of a small house on the edge of town. The previous tenants left for California. It's not much, but it's available. A house with her." The walls of the narrow hallway seemed to close in. "I don't suppose you'd consider just going back to your father's place? We could tell people I'm away on business or something." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, resignation. "That would only fuel more gossip. People are watching us. Mr. Cole. Everything we do now will be scrutinized and discussed." Mr. Cole. Not even Ethan. The formality of it rankled. "Fine," he said curtly. "Give me an hour to pack my things." She nodded and turned to go, then paused. "I'll be at my father's store. The house is on Cottonwood Lane, the last one before the desert. Here's the key." She placed a worn brass key on the door frame. "I've already moved my belongings there." After she left, Ethan slumped against the door. This was really happening. He was going to live in a house with a woman he barely knew, bound by a drunken bet and the inflexible code of honor that governed life in the West. An hour later, he loaded his possessions, precious few as they were, onto his horse and made his way through town. Every person he passed seemed to smirk knowingly. "Mrs." Henderson actually had the gall to call out congratulations from her porch. The house on Cottonwood Lane was exactly as Clara had described. Not much. A simple 2-room structure with a lean-to kitchen, a small porch, and a patch of dirt that might generously be called a yard. The wood was weathered gray, and the whole thing looked like a strong wind might blow it over. Ethan tied his horse to the rickety fence and stepped inside. The front room served as both living area and dining room, with a stone fireplace taking up one wall. Through an open doorway, he glimpsed the bedroom. One bed. He noted with a sinking feeling, a faded quilt, a washstand. Clara had already made her presence known. The floor was swept clean. Plain muslin curtains hung in the windows. And something was simmering on the stove that actually smelled good. "You came," Clara said from the kitchen doorway. She'd tied an apron over her dress and flour dusted her hands. "Said I would, didn't I?" Ethan dropped his saddlebags by the door. "Look, we need to get some things straight. This marriage, it's just paper. I won't bother you if you don't bother me. We'll live like roommates. I guess I'll take the floor in here. You keep the bedroom." Clara's expression didn't change. "As you wish. Dinner will be ready at 6. She turned back to the kitchen. "I might not be here. Got business in town. I'll keep a plate warm." Her calm acceptance irritated him more than anger would have. He wanted her to rail at him, to cry, to do something that would justify his resentment. Instead, she moved through the house like a ghost, quietly efficient, asking nothing of him. The first week passed in awkward silence. true to his word. Ethan spent most of his time away. At the saloon, playing cards, riding the desert trails. Anywhere but the small house that felt more like a prison with each passing day. When he did come home, usually late and often drunk, he'd find a plate of food waiting on the stove, the house tidy. His clothes washed and folded. Clara never complained. She rose before dawn, tended the house, walked to town to help at her father's store, and returned to cook dinner. In the evenings, she'd sit by the fire with her sewing or a book, seemingly content with the silence. It was driving Ethan mad. "Don't you ever talk," he burst out one evening, whiskey making him bold. Clara looked up from her mending. "What would you like me to say?" "I don't know. Anything. Curse me out for being a lousy husband. Tell me about your day. Hell, recite the alphabet. This silence is like living with a ghost." "I thought you preferred it this way. You said not to bother you." He had said that, hadn't he? Ethan slouched in his chair, suddenly feeling foolish. Well, maybe I was wrong. A man likes a little conversation with his meals. "All right." Clara set down her sewing. "Today Mrs. Morrison came into the store. She wanted credit for flour and sugar, but Papa had to refuse. They already owe $20, she cried. Her youngest is sick, and they've spent everything on doctor bills." The story was told simply, without emotion, but something in it made Ethan uncomfortable. "That's rough," he muttered. "Yes." Clara picked up her sewing again. "Will that be enough conversation, or would you like more?" Was she mocking him? Ethan studied her face, but found only that same calm expression. "That's fine," he said, and retreated to his makeshift bed by the fireplace. The second week brought unexpected challenges. Ethan woke one morning to find Clara struggling with the woodpile, trying to split logs that were clearly too large for her slight frame. "What are you doing?" He emerged onto the porch, squinting in the bright morning sun. "We need firewood. The nights are getting colder." He watched her raise the axe again, her form all wrong. "You're going to hurt yourself. Give me that." "I can manage." "No, you can't." He strode over and took the axe from her hands. "Watch." He demonstrated the proper stance and swing, splitting the log cleanly in two. Clara observed silently, then nodded. "I see. Thank you." That should have been the end of it, but Ethan found himself splitting the entire pile, working up a sweat in the cool morning air. When he finished, Clara brought him water and a towel. "You didn't have to do all of it," she said. He shrugged, oddly embarrassed. "Needed the exercise anyway." That afternoon, a storm blew in from the desert, fierce and sudden. Ethan was at the saloon when it hit, and he gave it little thought until Buck mentioned offhandedly that the wind had torn part of the roof off the old Jackson place. The old Jackson place. That's what locals called the house on Cottonwood Lane. Ethan was out the door before Buck finished talking. He rode hard through the wind and dust, rain starting to fall in heavy drops. The house came into view. And sure enough, a section of the roof over the bedroom had peeled back like paper. He burst through the door to find Clara trying to move their few pieces of furniture away from the leak, rain soaking through her dress. "Leave that," he ordered, grabbing a chair from her hands. "Get yourself dry before you catch your death. The bed will be ruined." "It's just a bed." Together they wrestled the furniture to safety. Then Ethan climbed onto the roof with hammer and nails, fighting the wind to secure a temporary patch of canvas. By the time he finished, they were both soaked through. Clara had built up the fire and set water to heat. She disappeared into the bedroom, what was left of it, and emerged in dry clothes, then quietly set about making coffee. "You came back," she said, handing him a steaming cup. "Course I did. Couldn't leave you to handle this alone." She studied him over her own cup. "Why not? You've left me to handle everything else alone." The words stung because they were true. Ethan set down his coffee, anger flaring. "Look, I never asked for this marriage. Neither of us did. I'm doing the best I can." "Are you—" For the first time, heat entered Clara's voice. "Because from where I sit, you're doing nothing at all. You eat the food I cook, wear the clothes I wash, sleep under the roof I tried to fix myself, and give nothing back but absence and the smell of whiskey. You want me to pretend to play the devoted husband when we both know this is a sham. I want you to show basic human decency." The words burst out of her, loud in the small room. Then, as if shocked by her own vehemence, she pressed her lips together and turned away. "Forgive me," I spoke out of turn. "No." Ethan caught her arm gently. "No, you didn't. You're right. I've been acting like a child, punishing you for a situation neither of us created." Clara looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face, this close. He could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could count the freckles across her nose. When had she become pretty? She pulled away. "The storm's passing. You should rest. Tomorrow we'll need to properly repair the roof." "We?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You don't think I'm going to let you up there alone, do you? You might fall and leave me a widow. Think of the scandal." It was the first joke she'd made, and Ethan found himself smiling back. "Can't have that. Your reputation would never recover." They worked together the next day, Clara proving surprisingly adept at handling tools and following instructions. Neighbors passing by stopped to stare at the sight of quiet Clara Dawson. Coal, they reminded themselves, straddling the roof beam in a split skirt, hammering nails with focused determination. "That wife of yours is full of surprises." Old Jim Peterson called up. Ethan glanced at Clara, who was concentrating on aligning a board properly. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and a strand of hair had escaped her usually neat bun. She looked nothing like the mouse everyone had called her. "Yeah," he said slowly. "She is." That evening, exhausted from the repairs, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. It was the first time they'd simply existed in each other's company without the weight of awkwardness between them. "My mother used to say storms show us what we're made of," Clara said quietly. "Smart woman. She's still around?" "She died when I was 12. Fever took her." Clara wrapped her arms around her knees. "Papa never remarried. Said he'd found his one true love and didn't see the point in looking for another." "That why you agreed to this marriage for him?" Clara was quiet so long, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. "Partly," she finally said. "But also, I was tired of being invisible. At least now people see me, even if it's only as the fool who married a man who doesn't want her." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Clara!" "It's getting cold." She stood abruptly. "I'll heat up the stew." As she disappeared inside, Ethan remained on the porch, her words echoing in his mind. The fool who married a man who doesn't want her. Is that what she thought? Is that what everyone thought? He'd been so focused on his own humiliation, his own loss of freedom, that he'd never considered what this marriage had cost her. Her dignity, her dreams of real love, her chance at happiness with someone who would choose her. Inside, he could hear her moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of home that he'd taken for granted. When had this stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like something else? "Ethan," Clara called. "Dinner's ready." He rose and went inside, pausing in the doorway to watch her ladle stew into bowls. The lamplight caught her hair, turning the brown to burnished copper. She moved with quiet grace, every gesture economical and purposeful. "What?" she asked, noticing his stare. "Nothing, just thank you for dinner, for everything." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "You're welcome." They ate in companionable silence, the storm damage temporarily patched, the house warm against the desert night. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a truce, perhaps a beginning. Outside, coyotes howled at the rising moon, and the wind whispered secrets through the cottonwood trees. Inside the small house on the edge of town, two people who'd been forced together by chance were slowly, carefully, learning to see each other. It was enough, for now. The transformation began subtly, like desert flowers blooming after rare rain. 3 weeks into their marriage, Ethan came home to find Clara skinning a rabbit on the back porch, her movements quick and efficient. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, surprised. "Snared it this morning near the wash." She didn't look up from her work. "Figured fresh meat would make a nice change from salt pork. You know how to set snares." "My mother taught me. She grew up on a farm in Missouri before Papa brought her west." Clara finished with the rabbit and wiped her hands on her apron. "There's plenty of game in the desert if you know where to look." Ethan watched her carry the meat inside, reassessing once again this woman he'd married. Each day seemed to reveal another layer, another skill, another surprise. The next morning, he woke to find her gone. Only a note on the table. "Gone hunting. Coffee's on the stove. See." He found her tracks leading into the desert and followed, curious. An hour later, he discovered her crouched behind a cluster of rocks, his own rifle steady in her hands as she sighted on a distant jackrabbit. The shot, when it came, was clean and true. "Nice shooting," Ethan said, stepping out from his cover. Clara startled, then frowned. "Were you following me?" "Wanted to make sure you were safe." "I've been hunting these lands since I was 14. She stood, slinging the rifle over her shoulder with practiced ease. "I don't need a guardian." "No," Ethan agreed, oddly proud. "You don't." They walked back together, Clara pointing out edible plants along the way. Prickly pear, mesquite pods, desert marigold. "Most folks see wasteland out here," she said, "but the desert provides if you know how to ask." That afternoon, while Clara worked at her father's store, Ethan found himself restless. The saloon held no appeal. The thought of cards and whiskey seemed hollow compared to the morning's revelations. Instead, he rode to the small cemetery on the hill overlooking town. His mother's grave was marked by a simple wooden cross, weathered by 8 years of sun and wind. Ethan hadn't visited in months. "Got myself married, Ma," he said to the silent stone. "Not the way you would have wanted. No church bells or white dress or any of that. Just a bet gone wrong and a woman who deserves better." The wind whispered through the dried grass, and somewhere a hawk cried. "She reminds me of you sometimes. Quiet, strong, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "You would have liked her. I think would have seen what I was too stupid to see." When he returned home, Clara was in the garden plot beside the house, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. She'd somehow acquired seeds and starts, creating neat rows of potential vegetables. "Thought desert was too harsh for gardening," Ethan commented. "My mother's people knew how to grow things in hard soil." Clara patted dirt around a small tomato plant. "It just takes extra care. Water at the right times. Shade during the hottest parts of the day. Even the desert can bloom." She had a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Without thinking, Ethan reached out to brush it away. Clara went very still at his touch. "Sorry," he said, pulling back. "You had some dirt." "It's fine." Her voice was barely above a whisper. She turned back to her plants, but Ethan caught the slight tremor in her hands. That evening, after dinner, Clara surprised him again. "Would you teach me to shoot better? I can hit what I aim at. But I've seen you draw. That speed might save a life someday." Ethan considered her request. Why the sudden interest? This is rough country. A woman should know how to defend herself and her home. She met his eyes steadily. "Will you teach me or not?" They started the next morning, setting up targets behind the house. Clara already knew the basics, but her draw was slow, her stance too rigid. "You're thinking too much," Ethan said, moving behind her to adjust her position. "It needs to be instinct, natural as breathing." His hands covered hers on the gun, guiding her through the motion. This close. He could smell the lavender soap she used, feel the warmth of her against his chest. Clara's breathing quickened. "Like this?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Yeah, just like that." He stepped back, needing distance. "Try it again." She practiced until her hands were sore, determined to master the skill. By the end of the week, her draw time had been cut in half. "You're a quick study," Ethan praised after a particularly good session. Clara holstered the gun with growing confidence. "I had a good teacher." The compliment warmed him more than it should have. Their new routine settled into something almost comfortable. Mornings often found them working together, hunting, tending the garden, maintaining the house. Afternoons. Clara went to town while Ethan saw to his horse and equipment or helped neighboring ranchers with odd jobs. Evenings were spent on the porch or by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just sharing the silence. It was during one of these quiet evenings that trouble came calling. Clara was reading aloud from one of her books. She'd taken to doing this after Ethan admitted he enjoyed the sound of her voice. When horses thundered up to the house, 3 riders, faces masked by bandanas, guns already drawn. "Ethan Cole," one called out. "Got business with you." Ethan was on his feet instantly, pushing Clara behind him. "Stay inside," he murmured. "Guns in the drawer by the stove." He stepped onto the porch, hands visible but ready. "Evening, boys. Little late for social calls." "This ain't social." The lead rider dismounted, gun trained on Ethan. "You cheated us out of $200 last month. Come to collect." "Never cheated at cards in my life," Ethan said calmly. "Not my fault you can't bluff worth a damn, Watson." The man yanked down his bandana, revealing the scarred face of Dale Watson, a rustler with a mean streak wider than the Rio Grande. "Always got a smart mouth, don't you, Cole? Maybe I should shut it permanent-like." "You could try." Watson's gun hand twitched. In that split second, several things happened at once. Ethan dove left, hand going for his gun. Watson fired, the bullet splintering wood where Ethan had been standing. The other riders raised their weapons, and Clara appeared in the doorway with Ethan's rifle, firing with deadly precision. Her first shot caught Watson's gun hand, sending his weapon spinning. The second took the hat off the second rider, who promptly decided he had urgent business elsewhere. The third rider, finding himself suddenly outnumbered, followed suit. Watson clutched his bleeding hand, staring at Clara in shock. She... "My wife doesn't take kindly to threats," Ethan said, his own gun now trained on the wounded man. "Neither do I. Get on your horse and ride. Come back, and she might aim a little more center next time." Watson scrambled onto his mount, cradling his hand. "This ain't over, Cole." "It is unless you want to explain to Sheriff Morrison how you got shot trying to rob honest folk." Ethan kept his gun steady until the riders disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he turn to Clara, who was still holding the rifle, her face pale but determined. "You all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, then abruptly sat down on the porch steps. "I've never shot at a person before." Ethan sat beside her, gently taking the rifle from her trembling hands. "You did what you had to do. Probably saved my life." "I couldn't let them hurt you." She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know this isn't a real marriage, but you're still... I couldn't just stand by." Something shifted in Ethan's chest, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even known was there. "Hey," he said, tilting her chin up. "This is real. Maybe not how it started, but what we have now, that's real as anything." Clara searched his face. "Is it?" Instead of answering with words, Ethan pulled her into his arms. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her body warm and soft and right. They sat that way for a long time, holding each other while the adrenaline faded and the night sounds of the desert resumed. "We make a pretty good team," Clara finally said against his chest. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We do." The next day, news of the attempted robbery spread through Coyote Ridge like wildfire. But the story that captured everyone's attention wasn't Ethan's quick reflexes or the bandit's cowardice. It was quiet Clara Cole dropping Dale Watson with a single shot. "Heard your wife's quite the marksman," Buck said when Ethan stopped by the general store. "Watson's telling everyone who'll listen about the she-devil who nearly took his hand off." "Clara's full of surprises," Ethan said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Seems you married better than you knew." Old Jim Peterson chimed in. "That little gal's got more sand than most men in this town." For the first time since the wedding, Ethan felt no shame when people mentioned his marriage. Instead, he found himself standing a little taller, speaking of Clara with genuine warmth. When he got home that evening, Clara was in the garden, humming softly as she worked. The late afternoon sun caught her hair, turning it to gold, and Ethan was struck again by how blind he'd been. "Town's all abuzz about you," he said, leaning against the fence. She looked up, a shy smile playing at her lips. "About me whatever for?" "Oh, just some story about a mild-mannered shopkeeper's daughter who turns out to be a crack shot." He grinned. "You're famous now. The woman who tamed Dale Watson." "I didn't tame him. I just shot him a little." Ethan laughed, delighted by her matter-of-fact response. "Just shot him a little. Lord, Clara, you're something else." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You're just finally seeing it." The truth of her words hit home. She was right. She hadn't changed. He had, or rather, his ability to see her had. "I was a fool," he said quietly. "Yes," Clara agreed. "But you're my fool now." It was the first time she'd claimed him. The first acknowledgement that whatever existed between them went both ways. Ethan reached out, tucking that perpetually wayward strand of hair behind her ear. "I can live with that," he said. Clara's smile bloomed full and bright, transforming her face. No, Ethan thought. She wasn't plain at all. She was beautiful in the way the desert was beautiful, subtle, enduring, and absolutely vital. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Dinner's getting cold, and I made apple pie." "You made pie." "Another hidden talent," she said with mock solemnity. "I'm full of them, you know." As they walked hand in hand toward the house, their house, Ethan realized that what had started as a prison sentence had become something else entirely. Not quite love. Not yet. But something growing stronger each day. Like Clara's garden pushing green shoots through the hard desert ground. The betting men at the Lucky Dollar had thought they were playing a grand joke, forcing wild Ethan Cole to marry quiet Clara Dawson. But the joke, it seemed, was on them. Because in trying to cage him, they'd given him something he hadn't even known he was missing. A partner, an equal, a woman whose depths he was only beginning to discover. And Ethan Cole, gambling man and gunslinger, found himself looking forward to the exploration. The tension had been building for days like storm clouds gathering over the desert. Small things, a broken fence that Ethan promised to fix but didn't, his absence at dinner 3 nights running, the smell of whiskey creeping back into their home. Clara bore it all with her usual quiet patience until the evening everything exploded. It started when Ethan stumbled in well past midnight, knocking over her carefully tended seedlings on the porch. "Watch where you're going," Clara said sharply from the doorway. "They're just plants." Ethan slurred, trying to right the overturned pots with clumsy hands. "They're not just plants." Clara knelt beside him, salvaging what she could. "They're hours of work, hope for fresh vegetables, care that you wouldn't understand because you care about nothing but cards and whiskey." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" She stood, dirt-covered hands clenched at her sides. "We were building something here. Ethan, after the robbery, after everything, I thought, but you're sliding back into old habits. One night out with the boys doesn't mean 3 nights. 3 nights you've chosen them over home. over me. The accusation hung between them, heavy as the desert heat. Ethan struggled to his feet, anger flaring through the whiskey haze. "You're not my keeper. Clara, just because you shot one bandit doesn't mean you own me." Her face went white. "Is that what you think this is, ownership?" "I don't know what this is." The words burst out of him, loud in the quiet night. "One day we're strangers forced together. The next you're acting like a real wife, expecting things, wanting things I don't know how to give. I expect basic consideration. I expect the man who held me after the shooting to remember that moment meant something. Maybe it didn't." Ethan regretted the words the instant they left his mouth, but pride and liquor wouldn't let him take them back. Maybe it was just adrenaline. Clara stood perfectly still, and in that stillness, Ethan saw her shut down, saw her retreat behind the walls she'd slowly been lowering when she finally spoke. Her voice was cold as winter wind. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." She turned to go inside, but something in Ethan snapped. All the confusion, the fear, the growing feelings he didn't know how to handle, it all came pouring out in a rush of words. "You want to know the truth? You scare me. Clara, this whole thing scares me. I was fine with my life before. Simple, uncomplicated. Then you come along with your quiet strength and your hidden depths, and suddenly I'm thinking about things I never wanted. Home, family, a future beyond the next card game." Clara paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "I look at you and I see my mother," Ethan continued, his voice cracking. "Strong, capable, making a life in this harsh place. And I see my father, how losing her destroyed him, turned him into a shell that whiskey couldn't fill. I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me." Now Clara did turn, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "So instead, you'll destroy what we have before it can become something real." "I don't know how to do this," Ethan admitted, sinking onto the porch steps. "I don't know how to be a husband." "I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for you to try." They stared at each other across the darkness. Two people caught between past and possibility. Then Clara did something unexpected. She walked back to him, cupped his face in her dirt-stained hands, and kissed him. Not the brief, obligatory kiss of their wedding day. This was fire and frustration, passion and pain. This was Clara unleashing everything she'd kept bottled inside. Her loneliness, her desire, her fierce determination to break through his walls. Ethan froze, overwhelmed by the intensity of it. Clara's hands tangled in his hair, her body pressed against his, and he felt himself drowning in sensation. The taste of her, sweet and wild. The soft sounds she made, the way she took what she wanted without apology or hesitation. When she finally pulled away, they were both breathing hard. "That," Clara said, her voice rough with emotion, "is what you're throwing away. That is what you're too scared to fight for." She left him there on the porch, stunned and reeling. The kiss had stripped him bare in ways that had nothing to do with clothing, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He could still feel the heat of her, could still taste her determination. Inside, he heard her moving around the bedroom, and then the decisive click of the lock. Ethan sat on the porch until dawn, replaying the kiss, her words, the pain in her eyes. As the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, he finally understood what Clara had been trying to show him. She hadn't been asking for grand gestures or pretty words. She'd been asking for his presence, his participation in the life they were building together. And he'd been so focused on protecting himself from potential pain that he'd been causing actual pain to the one person who'd stood by him. When the sun was fully up, Ethan rose, stiff and sober and resolved. He had work to do. He started with the seedlings, carefully repotting the salvageable ones and watering them thoroughly. Then he set about fixing the fence he'd neglected, along with a dozen other small repairs around the property. By mid-morning, he was sweating through his shirt, but he didn't stop. Clara emerged around noon, dressed for town. She paused, taking in his industrious activity. "I'm going to Papa's store," she said carefully. "I'll come with you. Just let me wash up." "That's not necessary." "Please." The word came out rougher than intended. "I'd like to, if you'll have me." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. They walked to town together, the silence between them different from their usual comfortable quiet. This was charged, expectant. At the store, Ethan helped unload shipments and served customers while Clara managed the accounts. Doc Dawson watched them with knowing eyes, but wisely kept his observations to himself. Clara, Mrs. Morrison came in, the woman whose sick child Clara had mentioned weeks ago. "I have the money we owe. Finally, my husband got work at the mine." As Clara counted out change, Ethan noticed the woman's worn shoes, the careful patches on her dress. Without thinking, he added an extra $1 from his own pocket to her bundle. "For the little one," he said gruffly when she protested. "Medicine's expensive." Mrs. Morrison's eyes welled with tears. "God bless you, Mr. Cole." After she left, Clara touched his arm gently. "That was kind of you." "Learned from the best," he replied, meaning it. That evening, Ethan cooked dinner, badly but with effort, while Clara tended her rescued plants. They ate his scorched beans and tough biscuits without complaint, and something in the shared meal began to ease the tension. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said finally. "Several, actually. I shouldn't have kissed you like that, not when you were not in anger." "Don't apologize for that kiss," Ethan said firmly. "It woke me up, made me see what I was wasting." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I'm done running. Clara, done hiding. You deserve better than half a husband." "I don't want perfect, Ethan. I just want real." "Then that's what you'll get. The real me, flaws, fears, and all." Clara turned her hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. "That's all I ever wanted." They sat that way for a while. Hands joined across the simple table, rebuilding connection with touch and truth. When Ethan finally spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "That kiss, though, where did you learn to kiss like that?" Clara blushed but met his eyes steadily. "I may be quiet, but I'm not made of stone. I've had years to think about what I wanted, what I dreamed of. Last night, I decided to stop dreaming and start taking." "Good," Ethan said, his voice dropping low. "Because I'd like you to take again." Clara's breath caught. "Now." "Now." She rose slowly, moving around the table to stand before him. This time, when she leaned down to kiss him, he was ready. He pulled her into his lap, one hand tangled in her hair, the other pressed against the small of her back. The kiss was different from the night before, less desperate, more exploring. A conversation without words, a promise made in touch and taste. When they finally broke apart, Clara's careful bun had come undone, her hair spilling around her shoulders like silk. Ethan traced her cheek with wondering fingers. "How did I not see you?" he murmured. "All this time, you were right here, and I was too stupid to see." "You see me now," Clara said simply. "That's what matters." They spent the rest of the evening on the porch, Clara in Ethan's lap, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. They talked, really talked, about dreams and fears, about Clara's mother and Ethan's father, about the life they wanted to build together. "I want children someday," Clara admitted quietly. "A house full of laughter?" "I'd like that," Ethan said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "Little girls with your quiet strength. Little boys with your wild heart. God help us all." Ethan laughed, and Clara joined him, the sound bright as bells in the desert night. When they finally went inside, Ethan didn't head for his makeshift bed by the fireplace. Instead, he looked at Clara questioningly. She held out her hand, leading him to the bedroom they'd never truly shared. "Are you sure?" he asked at the threshold. I've been sure since the day you taught me to shoot. Clara admitted, I was just waiting for you to catch up. What followed was a night of discovery, of passion unleashed and tenderness explored. Clara's quiet exterior hid depths of fire that left Ethan breathless and humbled. She was generous and demanding by turns, teaching him without words that the strongest foundations were built on mutual desire and trust. Later, as they lay entwined in the narrow bed, Ethan pressed kisses to Clara's shoulder, marveling at the way moonlight painted her skin silver. That kiss last night, he said. It left me naked in more ways than one. Clara turned in his arms, her eyes bright with satisfaction and love. Good. I wanted you stripped of all those walls you'd built. I wanted the real you. You've got him, Ethan promised, for better or worse. I'll take both, Clara said, sealing the vow with another kiss. Outside, a coyote sang to the moon, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the cottonwood trees. Inside the small house on the edge of town, two souls who'd been forced together by chance chose each other in truth, building something real from the ashes of a drunken bet. The fire Clara had unleashed with her wild kiss had indeed left Ethan naked, stripped of pretense, fear, and the lonely armor he'd worn for so long. And in that vulnerable state, he'd found something worth more than any poker pot or whiskey-soaked freedom. He'd found home. The change in the Cole household didn't go unnoticed by the citizens of Coyote Ridge, where once Ethan had haunted the saloon like a restless ghost. Now he could be found working alongside Clara in her father's store or improving their small property. The transformation sparked considerable gossip, particularly among those who'd witnessed the original bet. Never thought I'd see the day Ethan Cole turned domestic, Buck Harrison remarked one afternoon at the Lucky Dollar, watching through the window as Ethan helped Clara load supplies onto a wagon. Man's been tamed, Jake Morrison agreed, though not unkindly. Look at him, carrying packages like a regular shopkeeper. Maybe, Big Sam mused. Or maybe he finally figured out what the rest of us knew all along, that Clara Dawson was the best thing that ever happened to him. The conversation might have continued, but the subject himself walked through the doors just then. The saloon fell quiet, everyone waiting to see if the old Ethan would resurface. Afternoon, boys. Ethan greeted them easily. Buck, Jake, Sam. Ethan, Buck nodded. Haven't seen much of you lately. Thought maybe you'd forgotten the way here. Been busy. Ethan signaled for a beer, just one. The others noticed. Building a chicken coop, if you can believe it. Clara's got her heart set on fresh eggs. Chicken coop, Jake repeated, as if the words were foreign. You building a chicken coop. Man's got to eat. Ethan shrugged, but there was no defensiveness in it. Besides, makes Clara happy. And that matters to you now? Buck's question held a challenge. Ethan met his gaze steadily. It does, more than just about anything. An uncomfortable silence stretched until Big Sam cleared his throat. Well, good for you. Cole, about time someone made an honest man of you. Funny thing is, Ethan said, taking a long pull from his beer, I should be thanking you boys. That bet you rigged best thing that ever happened to me. Rigged? Buck tried to look offended. That's a serious accusation. Come on, Buck. You really think I couldn't tell when a deck's been tampered with? I've been playing cards since I was knee-high. Ethan's grin took any sting from his words. I knew what you were doing. Part of me wanted to call you on it, but, well, maybe part of me knew I needed the push. The men exchanged guilty glances. When did you figure it out? Jake asked. About 10 seconds after I sobered up, but by then I was already married, and my pride wouldn't let me back down. Ethan finished his beer and stood. So, thanks, boys. You did me a favor, even if you meant it as a joke. He tossed coins on the bar and headed for the door, pausing to look back. Oh, and Clara's planning a Sunday dinner next week. You're all invited. Fair warning, though. She's a crack shot now, so mind your manners." After he left, the three men sat in stunned silence until Buck finally spoke. "Did Ethan Cole just thank us for tricking him into marriage? And invite us to dinner?" Sam added, "With a woman who can shoot." Jake concluded, "Boys, I think we created something we didn't quite intend." Meanwhile, Ethan found Clara at the store, helping young Tommy Morrison pick out candy with his carefully saved pennies. "That's a wise choice," she was saying. "Peppermint sticks last longer than most sweets." The boy beamed up at her, and Ethan felt that now familiar warmth in his chest. Clara had a way with children, patient and kind without talking down to them. She'd make a wonderful mother someday. The thought no longer scared him. "Mrs. Cole." "Mrs." Henderson bustled in, her usual disapproving expression firmly in place. "I must speak with you about the church social next month." "Of course," Clara said pleasantly, though Ethan caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "Mrs." Henderson had been one of their most vocal critics. "As you know, we always have a shooting competition for the men," the older woman continued. "But given recent events, some of us thought perhaps a ladies' competition might be appropriate this year." Clara blinked. "A ladies' shooting competition?" "Well, you've certainly proven that women can handle firearms. Might as well make something positive of it." "Mrs." Henderson sniffed. "Though I dare say most proper ladies wouldn't know which end of a gun to hold." "I'd be happy to give lessons," Clara offered mildly. Safety is important, after all. "Mrs." Henderson's face went through several interesting color changes before she managed, "I'll consider that. Good day." After she swept out, Ethan moved to Clara's side. "A ladies' shooting competition." "Times are changing," Clara said with a small smile. "Even here in Coyote Ridge. Because of you." He wrapped an arm around her waist, no longer caring who might see. "You're changing this whole town, one quiet revolution at a time." "I'm just being myself." "Exactly." They worked together the rest of the afternoon, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed. Clara handled the customers while Ethan managed inventory and heavy lifting. Doc Dawson watched them with satisfaction, occasionally offering commentary. "Never thought I'd see the day when Ethan Cole would willingly count sacks of flour," he remarked during a lull. "Never thought I'd find it satisfying," Ethan admitted. "But there's something to be said for honest work." "And honest love," Doc added quietly. "Clara's bloomed since the wedding. Never seen her so happy." "I'm trying to keep it that way." "See that you do." Doc's tone was mild, but Ethan heard the fatherly warning beneath it. That evening, as they walked home together, Clara surprised him by taking a detour toward the cemetery. She led him to a simple marker he'd never noticed before. "Mama," she said softly, kneeling to clear away some dried grass. "I wanted you to meet Ethan properly." Ethan removed his hat, unexpectedly moved. "Mrs. Dawson, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. You raised an extraordinary daughter." Clara's hand found his. "I used to come here when the loneliness got too heavy, told her about the wedding, about how it wasn't what either of us planned." She paused, a small smile touching her lips. "Haven't been back since that night with the kiss. Haven't needed to. The loneliness is gone." "Clara." Ethan's throat felt tight. "She would have liked you," Clara continued. "Oh. She might have shot you herself for how you treated me at first, but she'd have come around. Mama always said the best men were the ones who learned from their mistakes." They stood together in the peaceful cemetery, surrounded by the stories of those who'd tried to carve lives from this unforgiving land. Some had succeeded, some had failed, but all had tried. "I love you," Ethan said suddenly, the words escaping before he could overthink them. "I should have said it sooner, but I want you to know. I love you. Clara Cole." Clara turned to face him fully. tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you too. Have for longer than I probably should admit." "When?" he asked, curious. "The day you taught me to shoot. You were so patient, so careful with me. I saw who you could be when you let your guard down." She wiped her eyes, laughing a little. "Of course. Then you went back to being impossible for weeks, but I held on to that glimpse." "Thank God you're stubborn," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Mama always said I got that from her side of the family. Said it would serve me well in the West." Clara rested her head against his chest. She was right. They stayed until sunset, Clara telling stories of her mother while Ethan listened, learning more about the woman who'd shaped his wife's quiet strength. When they finally headed home, the first stars were appearing. "We should stop by the saloon," Clara said unexpectedly. "You want to go to the saloon?" "I want to publicly claim my husband," she said with that mix of shyness and determination he'd come to adore. "Let everyone see that Ethan Cole is well and truly taken. Lead the way, Mrs. Cole." The lucky dollar fell silent when they entered together. Clara's arm linked through Ethan's. She'd never set foot in the saloon before. Respectable women didn't, generally. But Clara walked in like she owned the place, chin high, eyes steady. "Evening, everyone," she said pleasantly. "Don't mind us. Just came to fetch my husband for dinner." "Clara." Rosalie appeared at her elbow, grinning. "About time you marked your territory." "I learned from the best," Clara replied, surprising a laugh from the saloon girl. "Ladies aren't usually welcome here," one of the patrons called out, though he seemed more confused than hostile. "Good thing I'm not just any lady," Clara responded. "I'm the one who shot Dale Watson. Anyone have a problem with that?" Dead silence greeted this pronouncement. Then Buck Harrison raised his glass. "To Mrs. Cole, the best shot and best thing to happen to this town in years." The toast was taken up by others, and soon Clara found herself the unexpected center of positive attention. She handled it with grace, accepting congratulations and deflecting compliments with quiet humor. "Your wife's got sand," Jake murmured to Ethan. "More than you know," Ethan agreed, watching Clara chat with Rosalie like they were old friends. "More than I deserve." "Maybe," Jake allowed. "But you're working on being worthy of her. That counts for something." When they finally left, Clara was glowing with quiet triumph. "That wasn't so bad." "You were magnificent," Ethan said, "though I notice you didn't actually let me have a drink." "You didn't need one," Clara pointed out. "You were already drunk on admiration for your wife." "Guilty as charged." They laughed together, walking through the dusty streets toward home. The town that had once mocked their marriage now watched with something approaching respect, the quiet girl and the wild gunslinger, finding their way to something real and lasting. "I've been thinking," Clara said as they reached their house, "about the church social, the ladies' shooting competition." "Yeah. I want to win it." Her eyes sparked with competitive fire. "I want to show them all that being a proper lady and being strong aren't mutually exclusive." "You'll win," Ethan said with complete confidence. "Though you might want to practice a bit more. Some of those ranch women have been handling guns since childhood." "Will you help me?" "Every day if you want." Clara smiled, that transformative expression that still caught him off guard. "I love our life. Ethan, it's not what either of us planned, but it's ours." "Best unplanned thing that ever happened," he agreed, pulling her in for a kiss that would have scandalized Mrs. Henderson, but felt perfectly right under the vast desert sky. Inside their small house, the fireplace waited cold and unused. Ethan's makeshift bed had long since been dismantled, its blankets repurposed for their shared bedroom. The space that had once felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary, built not on the foundation of a bet but on choice, trust, and love. As they prepared for bed, moving around each other with comfortable familiarity, Clara hummed softly. The same tune from that afternoon in the garden. Ethan recognized it now as an old hymn about finding peace in unexpected places. How appropriate, he thought, watching his wife brush out her long hair. They'd both found peace in the last place they'd expected, with each other. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. "Just counting my blessings," Ethan said. "Turns out I've got more than I realized." "We both do," Clara agreed, and her smile promised 1,000 tomorrows, each one better than the last. The peace that had settled over the Cole household shattered like glass on a blazing August afternoon. Ethan was repairing the chicken coop when the thunder of hooves made him look up. 5 riders approached fast from the east, dust billowing in their wake like an approaching storm. He recognized the lead rider immediately, Blackjack Thornton, his scarred face unmistakable even at a distance. Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd won a significant sum from Thornton 2 years back in Tucson, and the man had sworn revenge. "Clara!" Ethan called, keeping his voice steady. "Get inside! Now!" She emerged from the garden, took one look at his face, and moved without question. Ethan heard the distinctive sound of their rifle being loaded as he stepped forward to meet the riders. "Thornton," he said as the men reined up. "Long way from Tucson. Been looking for you, Cole." Thornton's smile was all teeth and malice. "Heard you'd settled down. Took yourself a wife. Had to see it to believe it. Well, you've seen. Now move along." "Not so fast." Thornton dismounted, his men following suit. "You cost me $500 and my reputation. Figure your pretty little homestead here might start making us even. That was a clean game, and you know it." "Don't matter what I know. Matters what I want." Thornton's eyes drifted to the house. "Heard your wife's quite the beauty. Quiet type. I like quiet women." Ethan's hand moved toward his gun. "You'll leave her out of this. Or what you'll take on 5 of us." Thornton laughed. "You're fast, Cole." "But not that fast." The crack of a rifle split the air. Thornton's hat flew off. A neat hole punched through the crown. All eyes turned to see Clara standing in the doorway, rifle steady in her hands. "The next one goes lower," she said calmly. "I suggest you gentlemen move along." "Well, well." Thornton retrieved his hat. Examining the hole, "The mouse has teeth." "This mouse has more than teeth," Clara replied. "I've got 40 rounds and a clear view. Your choice how many you'd like to wear." One of Thornton's men shifted nervously. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Thornton's eyes never left Clara. "You won't shoot 5 men in cold blood. Little lady, you're not the type." Clara's answer was another shot, this one taking the gun from the nervous man's holster. He yelped, jumping back. "I count 4 now," she said. "Would you like to try for 3? "This isn't over," Thornton snarled, but he was already backing toward his horse. "You can't watch your back forever, Cole." "Don't have to," Ethan said. "My wife does it for me." The outlaws mounted up. Thornton's face twisted with rage. "You'll pay for this. Both of you." They rode off in a cloud of dust and curses. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Ethan allow his shoulders to relax. Clara lowered the rifle, and he saw her hands trembling. "You all right?" He reached her in 3 quick strides. "Fine," but she leaned into him gratefully. "Who was that?" "Jack Thornton. Bad blood from before we met." Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. "Those were some impressive shots." "I was terrified," Clara admitted, "but I couldn't let them hurt you." "They'll be back," Ethan said grimly. "Men like Thornton don't forget humiliation. We need help." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Ethan rode to town, spreading word about Thornton's presence. Sheriff Morrison, sober for once, promised to watch for the outlaws, but warned his jurisdiction ended at the town limits. "Your place is outside my reach," he said apologetically. Best I can do is deputize some men if you need them. I'll take what I can get. Ethan replied. Back home, he found Clara had been busy. She'd moved their valuables into a hidden cache, secured the animals, and filled every available container with water. You've done this before, Ethan observed. Mama and I survived 3 raids when I was young. Papa was away, and we had to manage alone. Clara checked the load on their spare pistol. I learned early that waiting for rescue was a luxury we couldn't afford. That night, they took turns keeping watch. The desert was quiet save for the usual nocturnal sounds, but neither could shake the feeling of being observed. Maybe I should leave, Ethan said during his watch. Draw them away from you. Don't you dare, Clara said fiercely. We're partners. Remember, for better or worse. This is definitely worse. I've had worse than worse. She moved to sit beside him on the porch. At least now I'm not facing it alone. Dawn came without incident, but the reprieve was short-lived. Around noon, young Tommy Morrison came racing up on his father's horse. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole. The boy was breathless. Papa sent me. Those men you warned about. They're at the Garrett Ranch. Burned their barn. Took their horses. The Garrett place was only 5 miles north. Ethan's jaw tightened. Anyone hurt? No, sir, but Mr. Garrett said to tell you they were heading this way next. Ride back to town. Tommy, tell the sheriff we need those deputies now. After the boy galloped off, Ethan and Clara looked at each other. They're trying to draw me out, Ethan said. Then we don't give them what they want. Clara moved with sudden purpose. Help me with this. Together, they overturned their dining table, creating a barrier facing the front door. Clara positioned their ammunition within easy reach, while Ethan checked sight lines from the windows. When I was in the army, Ethan said, we called this fortifying up. Never thought I'd be doing it in my own home. Our home, Clara corrected, and we'll defend it together. They didn't have long to wait. The outlaws approached openly this time. No attempt at stealth. Thornton rode in the center, his damaged hat like a badge of humiliation. Cole, he shouted, come out and face me like a man. I'm comfortable where I am. Ethan called back. Then I'll burn you out. Thornton gestured to his men, who produced torches. Clara's rifle spoke first, the torch spinning from the nearest man's hand. Ethan's pistol followed, sending another outlaw diving for cover. The battle was joined. What followed was the longest hour of Ethan's life. The outlaws had cover behind the water trough and fence posts, while he and Clara had the advantage of elevation and preparation. Shots were exchanged in rapid bursts, windows shattering, wood splintering. Kitchen window, Clara called, and Ethan spun to see a man trying to climb through. His shot caught the intruder in the shoulder, sending him tumbling back outside. Down to 3, he reported. 2, Clara corrected as her rifle cracked again. The one by the fence won't be bothering us anymore. Despite their success, ammunition was running low. Thornton seemed to sense this, his calls growing bolder. Getting quiet in there. Cole running out of bullets. Ethan met Clara's eyes. They had maybe a dozen rounds left between them. Not enough if Thornton rushed the house. Then, like salvation itself, came the sound of multiple horses approaching. Sheriff Morrison appeared with 6 deputized men, including Buck, Jake, and Big Sam. That's enough. Thornton, the sheriff shouted. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Throw down your weapons. For a moment, Ethan thought Thornton might fight anyway. Then the outlaw leader slowly raised his hands, his remaining man following suit. As the deputies took the outlaws into custody, Buck surveyed the bullet-riddled house with a low whistle. You two put up quite a fight. Clara did most of the work, Ethan said, wrapping an arm around his wife. I just tried to keep up. Don't let him fool you, Clara countered. He was magnificent. Sheriff Morrison approached. tipping his hat. Mrs. Cole, Mr. Cole. Town owes you a debt. Thornton's been wanted in 3 territories. Just defending our home, Clara said simply. Speaking of which, Doc Dawson pushed through the crowd, medical bag in hand. Let me check you both for injuries. As the doctor fussed over them, finding only minor cuts from flying glass, the townspeople began arriving. Word had spread quickly, and soon their yard was full of neighbors offering help. Mrs. Henderson, of all people, took charge of organizing repairs. Can't have the Cole place looking like a sieve, she declared. Martha, you and I will handle the windows. Men, get to work on that roof damage. Thank you, Clara said, surprised by the support. Mrs. Henderson's stern face softened slightly. You've shown us all what courage looks like. Mrs. Cole, least we can do is help clean up after it. As the afternoon wore on, their battle-scarred home transformed into something like a barn raising. Men patched walls while women prepared food. Children ran between the workers, treating it all like a grand adventure. Never seen anything like it, Ethan murmured to Clara as they watched their community come together. 6 months ago, half these people were laughing at our marriage. We're not the same people we were 6 months ago, Clara pointed out. Neither are they. As evening approached, the repairs were mostly complete. The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving promises to return tomorrow to finish the work. Finally, only Buck, Jake, and Sam remained. Hell of a woman you've got there, Cole, Buck said, saluting Clara with his flask. Watching her pick off those outlaws was like poetry. Deadly poetry, Jake added with admiration. Thank you for coming, Clara said. All of you. We couldn't have held out much longer. That's what neighbors do, Big Sam rumbled. Besides, couldn't let Thornton deprive us of our best entertainment. Entertainment? Ethan asked. Watching you two pretend you weren't perfect for each other? Buck grinned. Been better than any traveling show. After they left, Ethan and Clara stood alone in their patched-up home. Evidence of the battle remained, bullet holes that would need proper filling, bloodstains on the porch that would require scrubbing. But the house stood strong. We did it, Clara said wonderingly. We really did it. You did it, Ethan corrected, pulling her close. I've faced down men in saloons and back alleys, but I've never fought for something that mattered. Not like this. This is our home, our life. Clara's eyes shone with unshed tears. Worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for, Ethan said. The house is just wood and nails. But you... God, Clara, when I saw Thornton looking at you, I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands. Good thing I had a rifle then, Clara said with a shaky laugh. Much more efficient. They held each other as darkness fell, the events of the day settling over them like dust. In the morning, there would be statements to give, repairs to complete, normal life to resume. But tonight, they had each other and the knowledge that they'd stood together against the storm and survived. I love you, Ethan said into her hair, my quiet, fierce, incredible wife. I love you too, Clara replied, my wild, brave, wonderful husband. As they prepared for bed in their battle-scarred room, Clara paused by the window, looking out at the peaceful desert. Do you think there'll be others more men from your past? Maybe, Ethan admitted, but I'm not worried anymore. No. He joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Because whatever comes, we'll face it together, the quiet wife and the gambling man, proving everyone wrong one crisis at a time. Clara leaned back against him, a smile playing at her lips. I think I like the sound of that. Outside, the desert stretched endless under the stars, full of dangers and possibilities. But inside their small house on Cottonwood Lane, Ethan and Clara Cole had built something stronger than walls, a partnership forged in fire. tested by violence, and proven unbreakable. The bet that had started it all seemed like a lifetime ago. What remained was far more valuable than any poker pot, a love that could weather any storm, and a wife whose quiet strength had become Ethan's greatest treasure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were home. The aftermath of the Thornton raid rippled through Coyote Ridge like waves in a still pond. What had started as mockery of a forced marriage had transformed into genuine respect for the couple who'd stood against outlaws and won. The change was most evident in how people greeted Clara on the street, no longer with pitying looks, but with admiring nods and warm smiles. "Morning, Mrs. Cole," called Walter Bennett, the bank manager who'd barely acknowledged her existence before. "Fine display of marksmanship the other day." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," Clara replied with her usual quiet grace, though Ethan caught the pleased flush on her cheeks. They were in town for supplies, their repaired home needing restocking after the battle. As they moved through the general store, Ethan noticed how people made way for Clara now, how conversations shifted to include her rather than flow around her. "You've become something of a legend," he murmured as they examined bolts of fabric. "I'd rather be a good wife than a legend," Clara said, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "Well, lucky for me, you're both." Their shopping was interrupted by the arrival of a well-dressed stranger, his Eastern clothes marking him as decidedly not local. He approached them with the calculated smile of a man who wanted something. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole. My name is Theodore Garrison. I represent the Patterson Mining Company." Ethan's guard went up immediately. "What can we do for you?" "Mr. Garrison, I've heard about your recent altercation with the Thornton gang. Impressive work." Garrison's smile widened. "My employers are always looking for people with particular skills. Your gun handling, Mr. Cole, is legendary, and Mrs. Cole's marksmanship has become quite the topic of conversation." "We're not hired guns," Clara said firmly. "Oh, nothing so crude," Garrison assured them. "Security consultants, shall we say, the pay would be substantial enough to buy a proper ranch, perhaps build the kind of life a couple deserves." Ethan felt Clara tense beside him. A year ago, he might have jumped at such an offer. The old Ethan Cole would have seen only the adventure and the money. But now, "Not interested," he said flatly. "We've got all the life we need right here." Garrison's smile faltered. "Perhaps you should discuss it privately before—" The man said, "We're not interested." Clara's voice remained soft, but steel ran through it. "Good day, Mr. Garrison." They left the frustrated recruiter behind, finishing their shopping in companionable silence. It wasn't until they were loading the wagon that Clara spoke again. "That was a lot of money to turn down." "Was it?" Ethan secured a sack of flour. "Way I see it, we're already rich. Got a home, good land, each other. What would more money buy us that matters?" Clara stopped working to stare at him. "When did you become so wise?" "About the time I married the smartest woman in Arizona." He grinned. "Must be rubbing off on me." She kissed him right there on Main Street, not caring who saw, when they broke apart. Old Mrs. Patterson was fanning herself dramatically on the hotel porch, though she was clearly fighting a smile. The ride home was peaceful, the late afternoon sun painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Clara had linked her arm through his, humming contentedly. "I've been thinking," she said as their house came into view, "about what's next for us." "Oh, the church social is in 2 weeks, after I win that shooting competition." "When?" Ethan corrected. "When you win." "When I win," Clara amended with a smile. "I think things will really change, not just for us, but for other women in town. Mary Bennett already asked if I'd teach her to shoot, and Susan Martinez, and the Garrett twins." "You're starting a revolution," Ethan said, only half joking. Maybe just a small one. Clara's expression grew thoughtful. But I remember being invisible, being overlooked. If I can help other women find their strength, find their voice, isn't that worth doing? Everything you do is worth doing, Ethan said simply. They spent the evening working side by side, organizing their supplies and tending to the animals. The chickens Clara had wanted were thriving, and she'd added 2 goats to their small homestead. The garden had recovered from the battle, green shoots pushing up with desert determination. We should expand that eastern fence, Clara said over dinner. Maybe add another room to the house. Already planning improvements? Planning for the future. She met his eyes meaningfully. A house with children needs more space. Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Children. Eventually. Clara's cheeks pinked, but she held his gaze. Unless you object. No, Ethan said quickly, warmth flooding through him. No objections at all. Just surprised you're thinking about it already. I've been thinking about it since that kiss, Clara admitted. The wild one that changed everything. I knew then that I wanted all of it with you, the partnership, the passion, the family, the whole life. Ethan rose from his chair, pulling her into his arms. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times, Clara said against his chest. You're slipping. Can't have that. He tilted her chin up. I love you. Clara Cole. I love your quiet strength and your hidden fire. I love how you've made me a better man without trying to change who I am. You changed yourself, Clara corrected. I just gave you a reason to... They moved to the porch as was their evening custom, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains. But tonight felt different, charged with possibility and promise. A year from now, we could have a baby on this porch, Clara mused. Or 2 years from now, or 3. Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. Whenever it happens, it'll be right. Such patience from the man who used to live hand to mouth, never thinking past the next card game. That man was a fool, Ethan said. This one knows some things are worth waiting for, planning for, building toward. They sat in comfortable silence until the first stars appeared. Then Clara stood, tugging him to his feet. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led him to the small storage shed behind the house, producing a key he didn't recognize. Inside, neatly organized, were supplies he hadn't expected. Quality lumber, proper glass windows, even what looked like plans drawn on brown paper. Clara, what is all this? I've been saving, she said shyly. From the store work, from selling eggs and vegetables, every penny that didn't go to household needs went here. She gestured at the plans. Papa helped me draw these up. A proper addition to the house. 2 more rooms, maybe 3. Ethan studied the careful sketches, emotion thick in his throat. While he'd been wasting money in saloons, she'd been building their future, penny by careful penny. When did you start this? The day after the wedding. Clara admitted. I knew you didn't want to be married. Didn't want me, but I hoped. I thought maybe if I could make a real home, a place worth staying. Clara. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. You are my home. Don't you know that the house is just walls and a roof? You're what makes it worth staying. But the children will need rooms, she said practically, though her voice was thick with tears. Then we'll build them rooms, together. He pulled back to look at her. No more separate savings, though what's mine is yours. Remember? Old habits, Clara murmured. When you're used to being alone, it's hard to think in terms of together. Then we'll practice until it's natural. They locked the shed and walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside, as Clara prepared for bed, Ethan found himself studying their home with new eyes. He could see it now, the additions Clara had planned. children's laughter filling the spaces, a life rich with more than money could buy. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, emerging in her nightgown. "About how blind I was, how I almost missed all this because I was too stubborn to see what was right in front of me." "But you didn't miss it," Clara pointed out, moving into his embrace. "That's what matters." "Your father was right. You know, that day in the store when he said you'd bloomed since the wedding. I just wish I could take credit for it." "You can." Clara's hands framed his face. "You let me be myself. Do you know how rare that is? Most men would have tried to keep me quiet, keep me small. You gave me room to grow." "And you gave me roots," Ethan replied. "Fair trade, I'd say." They made love with a tenderness that still surprised him. This woman who could shoot outlaws and kiss with wild abandon, yet touch him with such gentle reverence. Afterward, as Clara slept beside him, Ethan stared at the ceiling and marveled at the turns his life had taken. From a drunken bet to a forced marriage to this, a partnership that strengthened them both, a love that had grown from the most unlikely beginning. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The church social loomed with its shooting competition and social expectations. There would be more people like Garrison, trying to pull them away from what they'd built. There might even be more outlaws, more tests of their courage. But tonight, with Clara warm in his arms and their future spreading before them like an unwritten map, Ethan Cole knew he was the luckiest man in Arizona, not because of cards or chance, but because he'd been smart enough, eventually, to recognize treasure when he found it. "No more gambling," he whispered to the darkness. "I already won everything that matters." Clara stirred, murmuring his name in her sleep, and Ethan pulled her closer. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the desert, and the wind sang through the cottonwoods. Inside, two people who'd found each other through the strangest circumstances continued building a life worth living, one quiet moment at a time. The transformation was complete. The wild gunslinger and the quiet shopkeeper's daughter had become something new together, partners, lovers, and soon enough, Ethan hoped, parents to children who would grow up knowing they were loved, wanted, and worth fighting for. It was more than he'd ever dared dream, and exactly what Clara had always deserved. The morning of the church social dawned bright and clear, with the kind of crystalline sky that made the desert look like paradise. Clara stood before their small mirror, pinning her hair with unusual care. "You're going to win," Ethan said from the doorway, already dressed in his best shirt. "No need to be nervous." "I'm not nervous about the shooting," Clara admitted, smoothing her blue calico dress. "It's everything else, being the center of attention, having all those eyes on me." "Hey!" Ethan moved behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Remember what you told me you were tired of being invisible. This is your chance to be seen for who you really are. The woman who shot outlaws and married a gambler. The woman who defended her home and tamed a wild heart." He kissed her neck gently. "My extraordinary wife who's about to show this town what courage looks like." They arrived at the church grounds to find the social already in full swing. Booths sold preserves and pies. Children ran between the tables, and the men's shooting competition was just concluding. "Nice shooting, Patterson," someone called as the banker's son hit his final target. "But wait till you see what Mrs. Cole can do." Clara flushed as heads turned their way. The ladies' competition was a new addition, and opinions were clearly divided. Some women looked excited, others scandalized, and a few seemed caught between the two. Clara Mary Bennett hurried over, her usually timid face bright with excitement. "I've been practicing like you showed me. I actually hit the target yesterday." "That's wonderful," Clara said warmly. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try." Reverend Mills approached, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Cole, I must say, some of the church elders have expressed concern about this display." "What display would that be?" "Reverend, Ethan's voice was pleasant, but Clara heard the steel beneath. Women learning to protect themselves seems downright biblical to me. Didn't Deborah lead armies? The Reverend retreated, muttering about interpretations, and Clara squeezed Ethan's hand gratefully. The competition began with 8 women participating, more than anyone had expected. Mrs. Henderson had declared it unseemly and refused to watch, but Clara noticed her peeking from behind the lemonade stand. The first rounds were simple stationary targets at reasonable distances. Mary Bennett managed to hit 2 out of 5, earning enthusiastic applause. Susan Martinez did better with 3. The Garrett twins, ranch-raised and comfortable with firearms, each scored 4. Then it was Clara's turn. The crowd fell silent as she stepped to the line. She could feel their expectations, their curiosity, their judgment. For a moment, the old Clara wanted to shrink back, to miss on purpose, to fade into the background where it was safe. Then she caught Ethan's eye. He smiled, that crooked grin that had first annoyed and then enchanted her, and mouthed, "Show them." Clara raised the rifle, breathed out slowly, and fired. 5 shots, 5 bullseyes. The crowd erupted. Did you see that? Every single one, just like with the outlaws. The competition continued through increasingly difficult challenges. Moving targets, greater distances, shooting from different positions. One by one, the other women dropped out with good humor, until only Clara and one of the Garrett twins, Rebecca, remained. "Final round," announced Judge Carter, who was serving as referee. "Quick draw with pistols. First to hit 3 bottles wins." Clara's heart raced. This was Ethan's specialty, not hers, though he'd trained her well. She took her position, aware of the entire town watching. "Ready," the judge called. "Set, draw." Clara's hand moved without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over. The pistol came up smooth and fast, her shots ringing out in rapid succession. Glass shattered. 1, 2, 3 bottles exploding in sequence. She'd won. The crowd's roar was deafening. Women rushed to congratulate her while men nodded approval. Even Mrs. Henderson emerged from behind the lemonade stand to offer grudging praise. "Well," the older woman sniffed, "I suppose if women must shoot, they should at least do it properly." Judge Carter presented Clara with the prize, a small silver cup engraved with First Annual Ladies Shooting Champion, and she held it high. No longer the invisible girl who'd been forced into marriage, but a woman who'd claimed her place in the world. "Speech," someone called, and others took up the cry. Clara looked to Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. She cleared her throat, her voice starting soft but growing stronger. 6 months ago, I was just the quiet girl behind the counter at my father's store. Then I married Ethan, not by choice, but by chance, or so I thought. She found his face in the crowd, saw his eyes shining with pride. But maybe it wasn't chance. Maybe it was exactly what both of us needed. She paused, gathering courage. I learned something important these past months. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Being a lady doesn't mean being helpless. And sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. The applause was warm and genuine. As Clara stepped down, women surrounded her, asking about lessons, sharing their own stories of feeling powerless and wanting to change. Ethan finally managed to reach her side. "That was beautiful," he said. "You were beautiful." "I was terrified," Clara confessed. "Couldn't tell. You looked like a queen up there." He grinned. "My queen of hearts who started as a losing hand." They spent the rest of the social together, truly together in a way they'd never been at public events. No more Ethan with the men and Clara alone with the women. They moved as a unit, talking with the neighbors, sharing their plans for expanding the house, accepting congratulations on Clara's victory. As the sun began to set, Buck Harrison approached with a shame-faced expression. "Ethan, Clara, I owe you both an apology." "For?" Ethan asked. though his eyes twinkled with knowledge. "For thinking I was playing a prank with that bet. For not seeing what everyone can see now. You two are perfect for each other." Buck shifted uncomfortably. "That bet was the best mistake I ever made." "Yes," Clara said simply. "It was." They stayed until the stars came out, dancing to the fiddle music, sharing pie with friends who'd become true neighbors. The transformation was complete, not just of Ethan and Clara, but of how the town saw them. On the ride home, Clara held her silver cup and leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "Today felt like a new beginning," she said. "Every day with you feels like that," Ethan replied. "But yeah, something changed today. You showed them all who you really are." "We showed them who we are," Clara corrected. "Partners." They were almost home when Clara suddenly straightened. "Ethan, look!" Their little house glowed with lamplight, and there were figures on the porch. Ethan's hand went to his gun, then relaxed as he recognized them. Doc Dawson sat in one of their chairs, and beside him, unbelievably, was a woman Ethan hadn't seen in over a year. "Aunt Martha," he called out in shock. "There's my wayward nephew." The woman rose, a female version of Ethan with the same sharp features and determined jaw. "Heard you got yourself married and didn't even invite your only living relative." Introductions were made. Martha Cole proving to be as forceful as her nephew once was wild. She'd traveled from San Francisco after hearing rumors of Ethan's marriage and the recent excitement with outlaws. "Had to see for myself if the stories were true," she said, studying Clara with shrewd eyes. "My nephew, settled down with a wife who can outshoot him, seemed about as likely as snow in July." "It's all true," Clara said, meeting that direct gaze steadily. "Though Ethan can still outshoot me, I just had a better teacher." Martha's stern face cracked into a smile. "Oh, I like her. Ethan, I like her very much." They sat on the porch, sharing stories and strong coffee. Martha regaled them with tales of Ethan's youth, while Doc Dawson added his own observations about Clara's childhood. The night was warm with laughter and connection. "You know," Martha said as the evening grew late, "I came here expecting to find my nephew trapped in some foolish situation. Instead, I find him living a real life with a remarkable woman." She raised her coffee cup. "Two unexpected blessings." "Two unexpected blessings," they echoed. After their guests departed, Martha to the hotel with promises to stay a week, Doc Dawson to his own home. Ethan and Clara stood together in their doorway, looking out at the desert bathed in moonlight. "Your aunt is something," Clara said. "She's the one who raised me after my mother died, tough as nails and twice as sharp." Ethan pulled Clara close. "She was right, you know, about unexpected blessings." Clara turned in his arms, her shooting prize still clutched in one hand. "Remember our wedding day, how miserable we both were?" "Worst day of my life," Ethan agreed, "until it became the beginning of the best part." "Forced to marry the quietest wife on a bet," Clara quoted with a smile. "But my wild kiss left me naked in your fire." Ethan finished, "Stripped of all my defenses, all my fears. Just me and you and the truth between us." They kissed there in the doorway, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, Clara's eyes were bright with tears and joy. "I love our life," she said simply. "I love you," Ethan replied. "My quiet wife who was never quiet at all. My teacher, my partner, my heart." They went inside together, to the home they'd built from a bet and stubbornness and slowly blooming love. On the table, Clara's silver cup caught the lamplight, a symbol of victory in more ways than one. Outside, the desert stretched endless and eternal, full of challenges yet to come. But inside their small house, two people who'd been forced together by chance had chosen each other in truth, proving that sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the happiest endings. The gambler who'd sworn off marriage and the quiet girl nobody noticed had become something together that neither could have been alone. They'd faced outlaws and gossip, doubt and danger, and emerged stronger for it all. And this was only the beginning. There would be children to raise, dreams to chase, a community to help shape. There would be more challenges, more triumphs, more quiet moments of perfect understanding. But tonight, as Clara set aside her prize and reached for her husband, as Ethan forgot every wild night that had come before in favor of this gentle domestic peace, they knew they'd already won everything that mattered. Love, home, each other. The bet had been Buck Harrison's idea of a joke. The joke, in the end, was how perfectly it had all worked out. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Ethan's journey from a forced marriage to true love touched your heart as much as it did mine. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know if you're enjoying this from the comfort of your home, during your commute, or perhaps even somewhere in the American West where our tale took place. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of romance and adventure from the frontier. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover Clara and Ethan's story. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these tales of the Old West alive. Until next time, partners.